A lot of times I'm asked, how do I embellish my chords or make them more interesting, or my rhythm playing? How do I make my rhythm playing more interesting? And also, how do I get inspiration for different lead styles? Or how do I play around the chords? All of these are great questions, and they're all really important, especially the playing over the chords thing, because a lot of times as guitarists, we're stuck playing scales and we're trying to play scales over everything. But playing around the chords is really a great thing to be able to do. This answers all those questions in at least a basic way and gets people started on all of those topics, really. A couple things before we begin. You might want to look into the caged system. I really like the caged system. It gives an overview of how to find every note on the guitar, how to find all different types of versions of chords, different voicings of chords. You really get to know your fretboard with it. I guess essentially what I'll bring up about caged is that all chords are shapes. And a lot of the chords that we used are based on a few different shapes. And they're all the open major chords on guitar. So you have C, you have A, you have G, E, and D. Now, since we're going to be looking at E shaped chords or sixth string roots, we're going to look at how to make different shapes with E. And again, very simply, this is an E chord, as we all know, as we should know. Maybe we don't know, but you're going to know. This is an E chord, and it's in the shape of an E. This is also an E chord. But what chord does it look like to you? To me, it looks like a D chord. So I would say this is an E in the shape of a D. Now, while that sounds unnecessarily complex, it's actually really helpful when you're trying to find different voicings. After a while, you don't really necessarily think about things that way, and it'll just come naturally. All right, so by the same token, again, this is an E in the shape of an E. And if we move this up, we can make different chords, but it's still in the shape of an E. You can see that E shape right here. This is an F sharp in the shape of an E. And the reason we know that is because the root of E-shaped chords is on the sixth string or the E string. And this right here is an F sharp. The second fret is an F sharp. So therefore, this is an F sharp chord. That's just a very, very basic idea of what the cage system talks about. I would definitely recommend looking into that more deeply, definitely. All right, so the very first place I like to start with this is the blues turnaround. And the reason is because it uses the, in this case, in the one that I'm doing, it uses the E shape, but at the same time, it goes to another shape of the chord. And that's going to help us embellish our chords. You can also use the blues turnaround or the notes in it to play over the chord as well. And there's different variations in the document that I have here, but I'm just going to go over this one exactly. So a blues turnaround typically starts on the 11th bar of the 12-bar blues, and it goes into the 12th bar, and it makes a way for the song to basically turn around again, and it gets you back to the top, or you can find a way to end the song. It goes from the 1 chord to the 5 chord, and then it goes back to the 1 chord again. So it kind of turns around. That's just the way I think about it anyway. Anyone's welcome to tell me I'm wrong. More than happy to acknowledge that. But again, this has to do with being practical and getting stuff done on guitar. So I'm going to play that blues turnaround after playing the entire sequence of chords in a blues progression. And this is how it goes. This is the 10th bar. Oh, that's 10th bar. Ready now. Okay, so essentially that's it. And if we break it down, I play it a little bit slower. Just the turnaround, it's hit the E first. And then what's happening here is we're actually going into the D shape. I'll give you the full shape right now. Okay? And what it is, it's the octave. So this is the root, the low E string. And the octave is right here. That's another E. And it's on the D string. So therefore, we can actually make a D-shaped chord to find the next version or voicing of E. Now, we're not going to play this whole thing. We're just going to play these two notes right here. But it's good for us to picture it being in this E shape, because then we can do other things to it, like make it a seventh or a major seventh, but we're not going to use those right now. So I'll show you again. You have E, and then it goes up to that D shape of E. We're only using the the first and the third strings. Taking it down chromatic. And then there's... But this is the important part. This provides the basis for a way that we can embellish chords and also come up with great ideas for leads. It's also especially helpful if we try this in another key. If we only do it in E, we're only going to be used to doing it in E. We need to see how we can transpose this idea into other keys in order to use it effectively. Another key we can do it in is G. Okay, so the blues turnaround in G would look like this. And again, it would go to this D shape of G. So you'd go. And then... And I'm doing a D augmented there. You can also do a D7. But I like that D augmented sound. It really, really resolves back to G really nicely. Again, all of this is in the document. So that's the blues turnaround right there. So let's take it right to the application that I was initially really looking at. After we've practiced the blues turnaround, we can actually use these shapes in many different ways to make our chord progressions more interesting. Or maybe not our progressions. Maybe this doesn't have to do with chord selection, but it's a way for us to embellish the chords we are already using. The first thing that we're going to do is kind of get ourselves comfortable with the shapes that we're going to be using. Obviously, we have a full E here, but we're not going to be using the full E. We're not. We're going to be actually using just the top 4 strings of the whole chord. All right, so let me get this closer to the camera here. Cool. Right. All right, so we got the blues turnaround done. But how do we actually use this when we're not playing blues? How do we just use it when we're playing like a major chord? Now, there's a couple shapes we want to get used to make this a little bit more comfortable. If we look at the E chord, we're not going to be playing this full E chord, only because it's a little bit unwieldy to be able to use that full chord and move to the next part. So for instance, it would be like... You can do it, but I want to simplify things. So we have... All right, so what I would recommend actually is just using the top 4 strings in these E-shaped chords. All right, so I'm only playing this part of the chord to make it a little simpler. And it actually does make it a lot simpler because we can go... Cool. Same thing up here. Instead of playing this full-on G, we would just play the top 4. And if you look at the diagram, it's the same chord. It's just that you don't have these 2 strings involved. All right, so same exact chord. And then again, it makes it a little easier to go. Cool. Now that we have that established, that we're only going to use really the top 4 strings, so strings 1, 2, 3, and 4. In other words, the E, B, G, and D strings of the chord. Now that we have that established, we can actually go into playing this little embellishment that I really, really like, and it's the beginning of what we can learn about what's in the chord. All right, so, and we're going to learn why these notes exist the way that they do, at least a little bit. Okay, so this is the embellishment that I'm talking about. Sorry, just the top 4. There I'm playing an open string just because I can, but I'll give you the other example. And we can go all the way up to wherever we want to, really. And let's get that in focus. Cool. So that's the riff right there. And now let's go through it a little bit slower. All right. We have the first chord. In this case, it's G. I think there's other examples in the document, but this is G. The next thing we do is we slide up our middle finger to the, in this case, the 5th fret, and then we put our ring finger down on the 5th fret on the 1st string, right? And that's kind of like our transition. I think if we wanted to be really, really precise about it, in the key of G, this is an A minor. Really, you have an A and a C. You know, I guess you could also see it as a C6, but I would really look at it as an A minor because it's the next chord in the key of G major anyway, so it's kind of good to know. And then when we take it up 2 frets again, what is this? But the D shape of G. But we're only playing these 2 top ones, just like in the blues turnaround. That's why I feel like it's important to learn your basic blues turnaround. So again, we have the top 4 of G, then we have the transition, then we have the other voicing of G. One way that you know you got it right is kind of with a somewhat annoying, or at least really popular song that we all really know, is it sounds like Brown Eyed Girl. Right? If we took that riff to another place, it'd be like... So that's one way we know we got it right, when we play something that we've heard a million times. So that's the major chord version. And you want to be able to play this in a lot of different keys because you don't want to just know it in one key. So we have the key of E right here. And again, this is that major third right there. And then we slide that up and we put, oh, actually, yeah. And then when we're up here, another thing to recognize about all this is you don't have to play it that way. You can just play like... however you want to play it. I'm just kind of messing around, but there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. Now, you can also learn this with minor chords, but it's a little bit different because obviously the minor chords have different notes in them. If you know your music theory at all, you would know that the difference between a major chord and a minor chord is simply one note, and that is the third. In a major chord, the third is natural, or you could say a major third. In a minor chord, the third is flatted, or you could say a minor third. There's 2 different ways of voicing or saying that. So obviously it's going to be different. If we were to play a minor chord, say E minor, and then use the major version of the embellishment, it would sound like this. I don't know, it sounds kind of cool, but it doesn't actually go together. If we were to play them at the same time, let me see if I can. This would be at the same time. Okay, so we have a G, which is the minor third, and up here we have the G sharp. And there are circumstances you can use both. This is really not one of them. So we have to change up the notes in the embellishment just like we would change up the notes in the chord itself. So we have E minor. And now, I just said before with Cage, you have E and then you have D after it. It would be the same thing with minor chords. You have E minor, and then you have this D minor shape right here, which is, of course, another E minor. We don't necessarily have to look at it that way right now. Right now, we can just learn the shapes. So we have the top 4, And then we have the same exact transition. I shouldn't be playing that middle note though. Neat little tip. Remember, you can always block off this B string with kind of like, you know, a part of your middle finger or whatever finger you're using. But instead of, let's do it again. You would go. So it's a little bit similar, but there's only one difference here. Instead of the 4th fret in the example of E minor, you'd have the 3rd fret on the 1st string. So again. And it's the same thing if we were to do, say, C minor. Okay, so C minor, top 4. And that sounds, you know, you can make some really cool stuff with that. But it's a little bit different than major. So these are just some ways that we can kind of work our way around chords. There's a lot of diagrams and different things. It's very verbose. I have a whole document on it. I have tabs for all of it. And obviously I'll make that available. If there's anything you don't understand about this, I'm still in the process of refining my videos and understanding how I need to make them. It's a little bit easier sometimes to do this in person because I get feedback right away when someone doesn't understand something. So let me know. I'm going to edit this now and put it online. I'm going to share it with a few people right off the bat. So any feedback you have would be really, really great. So I appreciate it. So again, this is just a way for me to show guitarists how to, you know, in a practical application kind of way, use these skills. It's not so much about the theory, even though theory is important. There's a lot of theory you can get out of this too. And we can always go over that another time. So just to review, we have the blues turnaround. Right? And what that's doing, you have the E shape of E in this case, and then you have the D shape of E. And you're using those two to kind of like coordinate with each other. Okay, and by the same token, you could do that with any chord you want at any point. Like here, I'll do an A. And what this is you have an A, you have a transitional double stop, I guess you could say, unless double stop's supposed to be in a row, but you have a harmony here. It's a transitional harmony. And then when you go up to this one, you're actually doing another version of A, but you're only doing the 1st and 3rd strings. And now if it were minor, you would obviously voice this differently. And because you voice that differently, you would voice the different voicing. You'd voice the higher version differently. You'd still have that transition, but then when you go here, it looks a little different. And a lot of ways that you can use this, just to sum it up, if you have a song, you know, your typical 1-4-5, let's say 1-4-5 in the key of G, so the chords G, C, and D, all on the 6th string right now, 6-string roots. You would play it like this. And you'll notice I played it different ways each time, you know, and it didn't always come out right, but it gives you some ideas for solos because you can actually start solos off with that to get an idea of what different tonalities you can get for your solo. And also kind of work your way around a scale. One little interesting thing about this is eventually, once you know this system well enough, you can actually know the entire scale of any given key if you know the pattern. Okay, so if you know the pattern about this, sorry, I'm just trying to get it to focus. If you know the pattern, you could honestly know the entire scale. All right, so key of G, you have All of those harmony notes could be used over the G chord.